Hey everyone, this is Lynn Bartown, and you are listening to the A.P.E.X. Hour on KSUU Thunder 91.1. In this show, you get more personal time with the guests who visit Southern Utah University from all over, learning more about their stories and opinions beyond their presentations on stage. We will also give you some new music to listen to and hope to turn you on to some new sounds and new genres. You can find us here every Thursday at 3 p.m. or on the web at scu.edu/apex. But for now, welcome to this week's show here on Thunder 91.1. All right, everyone, welcome in. It's the A.P.E.X. Hour. It's Thursday afternoon, and I am so happy to be here today, as always. And we've had another awesome day at A.P.E.X. events, and I have author David Anthony Durham in with me. Welcome into the studio.
Lynn, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Yay! I have just been having such a great time exploring your work, reading your books. And one of the things that just stands out is that you are a writer in multiple genres. I mean, let me see if I can name them all, and then you can let me know. So literary, Western, fantasy, science fiction, historical fiction. Does that cover them? I mean, my goodness.
Yeah, I guess you could add, I don't know if there's a subcategory there for superhero mutants, kind of.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that vibe, that's in there too.
You just have the coolest, I mean, that's just the coolest thing ever, and I want to get into all the different, books. I mean, some of the titles that we've been talking about today are your Acacia trilogy, is a trilogy right now, and a Gabriel story, and your newest book is The Shadow Prince. There are just so many things to talk about. But my first question for you, I'm always curious with writers to ask the question, when did you know this was what you wanted to do with your life? How did you get started in writing?
Wow, I haven't thought about this for a long time, but although I was a slow reader and kind of reluctant reader, when I eventually did, discover The Hobbit and fantasy and suddenly was a voracious reader, like just like that, it was probably shortly thereafter that I named my my career. There's a journal that I kept in 8th grade. It was part of my English class. Had to write something in it every day, and part of what I wrote in it were stories. Wow. Okay, you actually just brought this back. This memory back. Oh my
gosh, I love this.
Yeah, there was stories about a kind of a race of people-sized turtles. And I was not, copying off Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think it was probably before that even happened.
We won't tell.
in a fantasy setting, kind of warrior turtles. And in particular, there's an entry in there where I say, this is 8th grade, that I want to be a writer.
Wow.
That's what I'm going to do when I grow up.
That's beautiful.
I forgot about that for a while. I have to admit that.
Yeah.
So that was 8th grade. By the time I went through high school, I was not the best student there. And then I rediscovered it about a couple of years into my undergrad. Yeah. And then it went to, oh, okay, wait. I knew this in 8th grade. I'm supposed to be a writer. Let me get serious about it. So I did.
That is amazing. The journaling, that's such a special thing. I remember doing that as well. And I think that's just a great way. I mean, what a nice memory of that. And that there were stories in it as well. So that's kind of your creative expression coming out right from the get-go.
And I guess the thing that occurs to me as well is gratitude to that teacher for making me keep that journal.
Beautiful.
I might not have remembered. Yeah. I might not have named my profession.
Yeah. Well, fast forward to now, you've done so much. I'd love to ask you. I know it's kind of jumping around, but I'd love to ask you. And we've talked a bit about it, but what does it feel like to write in different genres? I mean, is it something that kind of was a natural evolution for you? Is it something that you sort of are standing on the hill proclaiming with, I will be a multi-genre writer? Talk to me about the identity associated with being involved in so many different genres.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't say I, stood on the hill and proclaimed it, but I do remember when I ended up with the agent I still have now, Sloan Harris at ICM. I said, we're doing my first book, and we're talking about my future, my career going forward. And I said, what I'd like to do is, write these literary novels and also, maybe throw in, a fantasy series at some point and just be able to kind of balance and kind of go between the two. And he kind of went, yeah, I'm not sure that would work. Because at the time, there's a separation in the genres, and it's not something that people did that frequently. Or some writers who would do it would do it under different names, actually. So I said, okay, well, we'll see. But the idea obviously stuck with me. And for me, it's not the best way to build a career in terms of establishing a name for yourself and a particular readership.
Right.
But in each case, as I've moved, I have probably lost some readers in the process and gained new readers as well. And for me, I do find inspiration in so many genres. So it makes sense to also to write in them. I get excited about picking up sort of a slightly different toolkit, different reader expectations, and kind of problem solving the way through a new genre. It keeps it interesting.
Well, I'd love for you to go into a little more detail about that, because I'm super curious about those toolkits and about those reader expectations. I mean, I know these are generalizations, of course, but can you talk a little bit to, what that means in terms of fantasy versus, historical or Western or young adult or whatever? Can you talk about what some of the toolkits might be and different techniques, and then also what different expectations are? Like, what do you how as a writer do you look to those audiences? What differences are there?
Well, it's interesting that in some ways I look at them the same, except that one of the big changes from my early days of writing very literary fiction was that my emphasis was all on character and character development and literary language and the structure of sentences, all of which is, it's great. And I love a good literary novel. I would say, though, that my MFA program, kind of looked down on plot and drama and things happening. And that's when I ventured into my first published novel, that's Gabriel's Story. That kind of pulled me into, because it's set in the West, I needed to read some Westerns. And I think somewhere in there, as I began writing that novel and was into it a little ways, I remember the day that I had a whole bunch of ideas, like stuff was going to happen, and there were going to be horse like chases, and it was going to cover various states, and there's going to be all this drama. And when my wife came home, I told her, I had all these ideas today of where this novel could go, but stuff happens, and I was kind of like puzzled. I was like, can I do that?
Awesome. Can I write plot?
Exactly. And my wife, who's kind of awesome in all things, said, "Well, it sounds like you want to, so
That's great.
So do it."
Yeah.
So that was one thing, and I was aware when that novel got published how humbling that experience was. Like, instead of feeling like, hey, I've conquered the
Western.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. It was more like, wow, people are going to be reading this now. And that kind of fired a belief that I had to make sure that I was delivering for folks. Like early on, the novels were very serious, and they were very issue oriented, and that was important to me. But I needed to remember to entertain and to value people's time when they're spending it with your words. So make sure there's a good story there. So it's not exactly a toolkit, but that breakthrough, it had to be important because it's the breakthrough that got me into print, and that's continued. Yeah.
Well, another question that leads to what you were saying is do you have someone specifically in mind as a reader, or is it a general, or is it yourself, or is it who do you think of when, or do you think of someone when you're writing?
I think of someone in between this perfect reader who also likes to read across genres, and likes to be entertained, but also read works that in some way or another engage with, questions of, what it means to be human, and how best to live our lives. And it's not so much that I think of, I wouldn't even say that between the adult genres, at least, that I really feel like I need to have an entirely new readership. I always want to be bringing along some of the folks who read my earlier books, and hopefully adding new readers to it. Like, as much as you can kind of look at my books and by description and go, wow, they're quite different. Mm-hmm. I would say there are themes that kind of weave, right through all of them. I don't know that the things that I write about in terms of ancient history and warfare in a novel like Pride of Carthage are all that different thematically than how I approach it in a novel like Acacia.
What are those themes that are most important to you in terms of your personal statements?
With both the, I think of the Hannibal novel and Spartacus novel, they're both novels where you kind of know what happens. In neither case, they don't win. Right. Things don't go well for either of them. And I think that my approach to those is to look at all the desires and aspirations, and in many cases, misplaced notions of national pride and greed and everything that lead to those conflicts, and to take characters through that. Ultimately, it ends up being about the cost of all that war, all that damage. Yeah. Those themes are definitely there in those novels. They also inform Acacia. I didn't go into a fantasy with the notion that this is going to be about the forces of good and the forces of evil, and which does the Dark Lord win, or does the the good guys win? Because I've never seen the world as that cut and dry. Mm-hmm. It's complicated, mm-hmm. and there are going into any of them, I've always wanted to tell the stories kind of from both sides, basically. So yeah, that's there. It's an exploration of the cost of the damage we do to one another, but also, both Hannibal toward the end of his novel. So there's a scene at the end of Pride of Carthage where Hannibal has returned to Carthage, and he has been away from his family and from his children as well, and he's lost the war, and it gets over, and he's returning to the city, and he goes and he sees his son, and he kind of motions for his son to come to him so that he can greet him, and his young son gets to him and cries, because and then what my Hannibal feels is it's as if he has brought home all of the death and the violence and the horror of war, and that his son doesn't know him, that kind of realization is the type of thing that is woven through a lot of my writing.
That's amazing. With some of these characters, particularly with Hannibal and Spartacus, who were real people, historical figures, how do you? We talked a little bit about this in another session today, but how do you sort of inhabit them? And so maybe you could talk a little bit more about there. Of course, there's the research, but I'm more interested in how you glean from them, how you glean into them, I guess, would be the way, and really get inside them.
Yeah. It's not always easy.
Yeah.
In the case of the Spartacus novel, for instance, it took a long time. I obviously I knew the events, and that was fine. So there's a story to tell there. You just tell the events. But if I didn't connect with the character and feel like I understood my imagined version of who he is, what he aspires to, why he does the things that we know that he did, I needed all that to make sense to me. So part of that process is not so much something that's done from like ahead of time. I don't sit down and like map out a sheet.
Right. This character is
exactly.
this way.
Yes, he thinks
this is
this.
how he feels. Yeah, right.
It's much more about putting myself, kind of right there on his shoulder, walking into a scene, and having him interact with people, and out of that process of almost having him walk me through it, and many other characters. That's my approach to a lot of my point of view characters. They walk me into their part of the story, and that includes just filling in the gaps, imagining and feeling free to know that I don't know that a word that I wrote is anything that Hannibal actually said. Like,
right.
You know,
right.
It's
right.
But I'm not trying to do that.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to believe in this version of Hannibal that hits all the moments and events it needs to, but in a way that has resonance and feels true to me, at least a fictional truth.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I want to play a little bit of a piece of music here, but then when I come back, I really want to get a little bit more into talking and thinking about characters, and I have some other questions that conversation just spurred from me.
Okay.
So as I was picking music for this, it was really interesting. I always try to kind of come up with some connections, but who knows? This first one, we've been talking a lot about world building, and so I don't know. I was looking for things that might be interesting in a world for me, and I've been really into this artist Sudan Archives, and this song is called Island Moss. So check it out. You're listening to KSU Youth under 91.1.
I'm tired. This is where I stand. Don't get concerned on what I'm on to. Had a couple words, now it's my turn. Can't stand to see a nigga bloody. Don't get it twisted, this is where I stand. You think I'm soft like Iceland moss all over me, like harmonies, like the breeze, right? So smooth like ice. I think that's why we're eye to eye. I'd rather lose focus instead. Enjoy these moments to spare. Looks like we're going nowhere. I let my path guide my heart and saw the words on the wall. Our love's a cave in the dark. It read that you're all talk. She said, how you gon' walk around acting like you don't even care? Last year we were so close, tell me how we get here. If you don't know, then I'll make it clear. I don't need your helping hand, no. Tired of the silly dance. Had something special on the high note. Don't get it twisted, this is where I stand. You think I'm soft like Iceland moss all over me, like harmonies, like the breeze, right? So smooth like ice. I think that's why we're eye to eye. You think I'm soft like Iceland moss? Watch me prance in the Iceland loft that we built with the Iceland thoughts. While you watch through the window cold, I let love you soft like Iceland moss. I loved you soft like Iceland moss. I held you close like Iceland moss. I held you close, then I saw you off. You think I'm soft like Iceland moss, all over me like harmonies. Life's a breeze, right? So smooth like ice. I think that's why we're eye to eye.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Apex Hour. This is Lynn Vartan. That song that you were just listening to was called Iceland Moss by Sudan Archives. As always, if you're interested in hearing the music that's played on the Apex Hour, you can go to Spotify, and there is a Spotify open playlist called Played on Apex Hour. And you can check out all the wide variety of songs that I've played in the shows over the years. So I am in the studio with author David Durham. He is the author of the Acacia series, Gabriel story, The Shadow Prince, and many other things. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We were talking before about characters and about inhabiting characters. I have another question about characters, and I'm asking it because in our conversations at meals and such over the past couple of days, you have said a couple of times, for me to fall in love with this character. And, I love that concept. And I wonder, is that it? Is that it for you? You when you, especially with your maybe protagonist or point of view characters, do you have to, in order to unlock them for yourself, do you have to sort of fall in love, as it will, with them? I mean, figuratively?
Yes. Especially with the main characters, I kind of use that terminology, that phrasing a lot when I think of writing about Spartacus or writing about Hannibal. But it's true to some degree with all the characters who, at least when I write from their point of view, I need to be able to understand some of the main things about them and to relate to those things. It's never as if I write a character who is, who I can't understand aspects of who that person is. No matter, even when they're pretty horrible, there's still something that I can connect with, or that I can know to be wary of. So that's important. And also there's an aspect of getting myself to a place where I kind of believe, at least in the zone of the creative process, I believe what they believe. And there was an aspect of that, especially in the Spartacus novel, The Risen, where I had to kind of make up a lot about the religious worship of these ancient Thracians in particular. And that was interesting because I had very little to go on. I had some names and some vague notions, but it felt important. It's going to be important to their characters, what they believed and how that shapes the actions they take. And so in the process, I was like, okay, what would the god or the gods of these people, what would that deity be like? And I guess the process of doing that maybe sounds a little weird, but it's not so much that I do it from the outside. It's more that I am kind of imagining myself into their mindset and convincing myself, at least temporarily, to believe what they believe. Yeah. So if I'm writing about some ceremony they're doing, I couldn't write about it if it didn't, to some degree, make sense to me. Right. And so that's part of it. And also, even just the process of creating the characters and their story and how they move through a novel is fundamentally one of. So in the case of Pride of Carthage, begins with a foot soldier, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a novel with a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different experiences, which I have not had. I've not been an ancient foot soldier. But when I put myself in his shoes, it's like, okay, why is he there? Yeah. What drove him to be there? What does he need? What is he trying to get out of this? What's at stake for this character? What does he hope and aspire to? And all those things kind of get fleshed out as I'm living in that character's skin.
Yeah.
And it's a fun part of the process. And again, it's very different than sitting down and grafting out who a character is. It's more done in the storytelling mode.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let me go even more. And so I teach music, and one of the things that I like to teach about is the different kinds of learning, like visual learning, oral learning, kinesthetic learning. As you're learning a piece and gaining deep learning of a piece of music, you want to try to access it in all those different ways. So we've talked quite a bit about characters. I'd like to kind of expand that conversation a little bit to the worlds around them. And I wonder, do you sit and see them? Do you hear them? What senses, are there multiple senses involved in your imagination as you're getting that stuff down on paper? Are you aware of that? I'm just curious about that, especially because one of the things we've talked about a lot is the depth of your world designing. And I just wondered about that part of it.
Interesting. I guess it must be, yes, a very multifaceted combination of sensations and influences. I'm thinking of Acacia now, and in that case, yeah, it's kind of creating a whole world,
yeah,
and in very different landscapes in this world,
right?
So I'm thinking about that now and going, okay, in a way, I kind of mapped that out in the opening portion of the book has a lone soldier kind of.
It's such a great opening, by the way. I love it.
Thank you. It's great.
I have an image of the hair so much in that, right. It's burned in. Yeah. Anyway.
It's funny. I can look back at something like that opening and realize that the process of writing that scene or that series of that sequence is me getting on this guy's shoulder and having him introduce the world to me. So he begins in this really Arctic landscape. His people are in exile into the far north, and kind of describe, what their fortress looks like, and then he proceeds to move down from there into more the heart of the empire, and it gets warmer and it gets kind of more tropical. So he's losing the accoutrements that he needed to survive in the cold, and taking on, moving into a different climate and into different cultures and all of that. It's kind of funny to look back at that now and go, oh, right. I was learning what it feels like to move through this world.
Oh, wow.
By having him do it. I mean, he's on a mission of assassination.
Right.
But yeah.
So do you, so this is such an interesting thing because it's like you get inside the novel as you're going. I mean, you kind of are inside it, right? You're on his shoulder, so to speak. Yeah. And so when you sit down to write in a day, let's say, do you sit and see him do something and then write it? Or, I mean, do you see a complete scene? Does it happen step by step? What's that like?
Wow. It's confusing. Okay. There's when I am really kind of deeply into a novel, and that's a great place to be. I need to be deeply into a novel again soon. I need to be back there. It becomes part of the fabric of every day. So it's not just that I sit down at the computer and at that point I'm getting into their head. I mean, that's one of the main times. But once I'm really kind of in the story, it's aspects of it are playing out in my mind no matter what. Mm-hmm. So there's not that much a separation between being in front of the computer with my fingers on the keys, between that and washing up dishes after dinner, because I can be there and something occurs to me like, oh, something clicks into place about what happens next in the story, or about why that happens next. And okay, this might seem weird, but it worked. When I was writing the Risen, it was a slow novel that kind of came to me slowly. It wasn't always easy. Novel number 7, I'm like, it should be easy. No, I had to relearn how to approach it.
Fascinating.
And one of those ways was I'd get a feeling when I knew I'd reached a problem in the story, and I wasn't quite sure what to do next, but I'd feel like I'm aware that the answer it's kind of like just, it's hiding somewhere, but I can feel the shape of it. I feel that it's there. I just don't have it. So when I lived in Western Massachusetts, we were out in the woods, and there was a particular bit of path behind our house in the woods. And when I had that feeling that, okay, there's something I'm almost going to get, I would go out to that bit of path, and I'd walk really slowly, and I would just look down at the path.
Yeah.
And it was as if I was looking for a small object on the ground. And when I did that, if I just walked slowly enough and for long enough, I almost always found it.
That's awesome.
It's kind of weird.
No, that's awesome. It's like a meditation. I mean, it's a moving meditation of sorts,
Yeah.
And I mean, I completely get what you're saying about, when you're deep into something. I think musicians feel that. I know when I'm learning a big piece and I'm deep in the learning process, the same, if I'm washing dishes, all of a sudden I'll realize that it's playing in my head.
Yeah.
Somebody once said to me, do you always hear music in my head? And my answer was like, no. But then for the next week, I started to kind of pay attention, and I was like, oh yeah, it is always in my head. I just never really was alert to it or not. So that sounds awesome. I mean, what a cool process.
And I guess there are similarities there.
Yeah. And
it is funny to think about how often the important revelations and plot details or the other thing is, there are a lot of occasions where I will have written something early in a book and only figure out what that thing is and how it resonates with the whole novel much later, and that can be a weird process too. It's like so it's like 4 months later and a couple hundred pages in, and it's like, oh, that ring that he put on, it's like that's I just figured out where that came from.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing!
And how that's going to change the story. Yeah,
our mind is what a fascinating thing. That's
it is.
So cool.
And that for me only happens when I'm doing the writing, as opposed to going, okay, let me just think up, all these important things that are going to happen. And
that's interesting.
It's once I'm actually in the story, and living with it, that there are these connections, that I didn't see before. I don't know that I could see them if I wasn't just spending the mental time almost 24 hours a day with it.
So are you the type of worker, writer, like what's a typical writing day? I know we all have many different kinds of days, but what's a typical writing day for you? There's of course that saying like, well, there's no such thing as the muse coming and knocking. I knock her over the head and drag her along, and so are you sort of wait for the spark, or you get in regularly and then let the spark come through? How does that work for you?
I frequently feel that my answers to questions are so contradictory, because it's never one thing.
Interesting.
I absolutely believe that fundamentally, I can't expect the story, the muse, to come to me. I have to go there. I have to go and put my fingers on the keys and begin to find my way into the story. And if I do that, then the ideas show up. It's like, okay, you've spent enough time trying. Here's a nugget. And it's like, oh, okay, great. I have that now. And there can be days or moments or writing days that are like that, and that's exactly what I need. There are other days when things aren't going well, and it's sometimes if they're not going well, I stay there and I try to make it work. And maybe something comes out of that. Or maybe I go, you know what? It's not happening today. It's time for me to stop. And maybe the best way forward is for me to walk away from the computer just now and do something else. And so it's like what works one day as part of the process might not work the next day. And it's kind of a matter of just knowing that one way or another, I'm gonna show up and try to do the work, and I'll be rewarded for it. If I do that enough.
Yeah. We got so quickly into such a great deep conversation that I feel like we should let anybody listening kind of have a little, sort of the 2-minute synopsis of some of the books that we've been talking about. I feel so comfortable talking with you, but now I feel like we should share with people. So I know we've talked about The Risen, and we've talked about The Pride of Carthage also, but I wonder if you might give us a little sort of, The Risen, what is it about? And we've touched on a little bit, but for anybody who might be like, I'm really interested in this guy, I want to get one of the books. So tell us about The Risen.
Okay, well, The Risen is kind of, in a way, it's a companion book to Pride of Carthage. Both feature historical figures that were enemies of Rome. So that seemed to be something that attracted me. And so The Risen, it's about the Spartacus rebellion in ancient Rome, and it's, he is the main character in terms of the main character of importance, and he is one point of view. But when I write a novel like that, I never want a big story like that to be told from only one character's point of view. So there are actually 10 point of view characters in that novel. The idea being that any war, it doesn't just affect the leaders, doesn't just affect the general. It affects everyone else in that society as well. So the point of views are everything from foot soldiers to camp followers, children's point of views to older people's point of views. And it's a real mixture that I hope tells kind of a people's history of the Spartacus rebellion. And so that's what that one is. And, Pride of Carthage similarly is a similar approach to Hannibal being the main focus, and his war with Rome, the Second Punic War. That was important for Rome's history. He came so very close to defeating them, but as he failed, eventually, that was the conflict that allowed Rome to kind of solidify its control of the Mediterranean and become what it became. And it's another one where I wanted to have lots of different points of view, and representation from different parts of the experience. That's kind of one of the ways I like to approach the bigger novels.
Yeah.
I read a novel a while back that was a first person narration from Hannibal's point of view, and I was like, this is so limited. It's there's so what about everybody else?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then we've also spoken a bit about Acacia, the Acacia trilogy. Could you give our listeners a little bit of a snapshot of that?
Acacia is an epic fantasy trilogy set in it's a magical, fantastical world. It gets a bit more magical as it goes. My desire there was to create a fantasy world that represented the real world diversity, that kind of looked at the complex ethnicities of our world and the cultures that come out of that, and to imagine that into a fantasy space. So that was a big part of it. I was also inclined to look at the notions of empire and national mythology. Any nation, we have a version of ourselves that we tell that is maybe history, but also has a lot of myth in there to validate the things that we've done. So it's a novel in which the good guys, don't have a clean slate.
Yeah.
And the apparent bad guys, well, they're not. It's more complex.
It's complicated.
Than that. Yeah. So I like those complications, but it's also a novel novel series that taught me taught me how to write fantasy, I guess. And that's
cool.
part of why it began lower magical, and it gets more fantastical as it goes.
Cool.
I think I got more comfortable with it, and also the world.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Another thing about that one that I liked is that there's the initial world, kind of the known world around Acacia, but part of what happens is that this empire, it does have a trade across the ocean with basically an unknown entity out there.
Right.
And when I wrote the first book, I didn't know what was over there, and that was really part of what drew me into the second. And
so you didn't know either.
I did not know. Nope.
Oh, that's like a cool little inside tip there.
That's why there's a second book, because part of me is like, okay, I'm looking at the globe. I can only see this much of it, but I'm gonna turn it a little bit. And,
that's so cool.
What's on the other side of that ocean? And then I get over there, and who are those people? Why are they participating in this trade? What do they want out of it? That's a fun part of the process as well. So epic fantasy that hopefully reads a bit like it's a fleshed out world, as if it's an epic historical.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does, for sure. Cool. Absolutely. Right. Well, there's two other novels that we could talk about more, but two other novels in particular that we've been sort of touching on here and there, and that is Gabriel's Story, which is your first published novel, right?
That's right. Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. First published novel, not first novel.
Right.
I wrote two that were unpublished. A little bit of one of those became some of the key ingredients of Gabriel's Story. It's I guess you could call it a Western, an African-American Western set in the 1870s. The family dynamic, which I initially wrote in a contemporary sense, is all kind of intact. The story became really different when I plucked it up in time and space and moved it to Kansas in the 1870s. It's a story partly about homesteading, partly about a disgruntled boy who does not like his stepfather, and chooses to go off on his own, and gets in a lot of trouble in the process, and comes to value a lot of what he left behind. And it's his journey, his circular journey out into the world and then back to his family. Yeah. That's that one. I've had a long interest in history, and American history and African American history, and I was very aware that in the historical record, African Americans they came west as they went north, after post slavery, but I felt like there weren't enough depictions of them getting to the West and trying to participating in that part of America's history. Right. So I was excited to write about that. So a little bit of a family story, a little bit of a historical desire I had to explore a topic, and they came together in that novel. And
then your newest book.
Yeah. The newest book is The Shadow Prince. Mm-hmm. This is my first middle grade fantasy. So it's like a bit younger than YA, something that can be read by can be read to kids kind of throughout elementary school, and then they can start reading it themselves into kind of middle school age. And in this case, it's ancient Egypt, but a magical ancient Egypt that's also a solar-powered ancient Egypt.
So cool.
Thank you. It's meant to be light and fun. There are a lot of there are a lot of gods of the Egyptian pantheon that are in it, and most of them and their traits are based on the historical record, because they were so interesting and diverse and shape-shifting and quirky. At least there's a way of seeing them that way, and that's how I envisioned it. The Shadow Prince himself is a young boy, a 12-year-old boy named Ash, who competes with other children who were born on the same day to be the bodyguard confidant of a prince of Egypt. And when that person wins that competition, which is seemingly deadly, they get that role for life. And that's what he sets out to do. Nothing is quite as he thinks at the beginning. We learn some things at the end. But yeah, it was that engagement with ancient Egypt, but wanting to do so in a fun way and in a fun semi-modern way because of the shadow because of the solar aspect to it. There's a technology that's powered by the sun, as we have in our own world. But they did it first in ancient Egypt.
That's so cool. Yeah, we steampunk fantasy. I mean, that's so awesome. Solar punk fantasy. Yeah, of course, solar punk fantasy. That's so amazing. All right, I have kind of a crazy question.
Okay.
If you've written so many just amazing characters, so developed. If you could become any one of your characters, is there one that comes to mind that, and I mean, of course, I'm sure in a way you have become all of them as you've written them, but I mean, like, does one kind of stand out? Like, yeah, I'd like to do a stint as that character, like, I don't know. Is there any one of them?
Wow, that's interesting.
And I'm sure it would change depending on where you are in your life, at different times. But right now, is there a particular character, either main character or a side character or whatever, that if you could become a character, who kind of turns you on in that way right now?
Well, I have to go with what popped in first.
Yeah.
That's Mina Akaran from the Acacia trilogy. It's almost like I wrote her.
Yeah.
But the notion of, what would it be like to be this kind of amazing, strong, feisty, wonderful warrior, kind person who sees an awful lot and comes to her own in a very different setting than she was raised in, finds power in a variety of ways, and actualizes that. So that's what comes to mind.
I love it.
Yes, I wrote her, but it's like, if I could actually be her, what would that be like?
Yeah, that's cool.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to play one more song, and this song I chose purely for the title, which is called "Build a Better World." I don't know that they're thinking about fantasy worlds per se, but I just thought that would be kind of a fun way in the context of what we're talking about here. If I can get it, there it goes. And so it's "Build a Better World" by London Electricity. You're listening to KSU Youth on 91.
I've been on my way down. I've been living with the lights out, getting troubled by the idle sounds of the day to day. I know I let you down. I did nothing to protect you. Didn't know how much you went through, and now it's too late. I wish I did more to love you. I wish I did more to keep you safe. And if I only could, I'd build a better world for you. I don't wanna see you hurt or struggling, sitting in your cold water. went through, doing anything to numb your way to an empty space, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out a meaning, trying to buy into the feeling of a better place. I wish I did more to love you. I wish I did more to keep you safe. And if I only could, I'd build a better world for you. I don't wanna see you hurt or struggling, sitting in your cold water. I wish I was fighting for you, keeping you close in that lonely walkers. I don't wanna see you hurt or struggling, sitting in your cold water. I wish I was fighting for you, keeping you close in that. I wish I did more to love you. I wish I did more to keep you safe. And if I ever could, I'd build a better world for you. For you. For you.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. That was Build a Better World by London Electricity. You're listening to KSU Youth under 91.1. This is the A.P.E.X Hour, and I am here with David Anthony Durham, and we are just about to close our hour with our favorite question of the whole day, which I ask all my guests, which basically the question is, what's turning you on this week? But before we get to that, I want to make sure to mention your website. Can you tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and any social media that you'd like to share, anything like that?
Sure. My website is just my name, davidanthonydurham.com. And that's the main resource. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, though I'm not that proficient at Twitter, but there, and Instagram as well. And all just searching by my name.
Awesome.
You can find me.
And you can find the books anywhere. And there are audiobooks of almost everything, right?
Yes. Yep. Everything's available on audio, and all the books remain in print, and certainly available online, easy to find if not in your local bookstore. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. So now to our last question of the day, and that is, what is turning you on this week? And it can be anything. It can be a book that you're reading, or a magazine, or a TV show, or a movie, or a favorite food, or it can run the gamut. So David Anthony Durham, what is turning you on this week?
Oh, there are two things that come to mind. One is that I've just handed in the draft of the second Shadow Prince novel.
Woo-hoo!
So continuing that story into a series, that really excites me.
Awesome.
And the other thing, it's something I've been doing semi-secretly last couple of years. It's writing and being involved in TV.
Ooh.
Not stuff that I can really talk about at the moment. That's
know.
the frustrating part of it.
Yeah.
But I have been involved with a number of developing shows, and that process of working collaboratively, with being in a room with people, just talking right through the day about what's the story and who are the characters and what's the best version of this, and bouncing ideas off each other, not being afraid to throw out ideas. I've been amazed each time I've had one of those experiences that at the end of the weekend of the session, it's like, there's all this stuff. There's a show on the board, and it all makes sense. That has been exciting. Writing scripts has been exciting. It's
cool.
It's still storytelling, but it's doing it with a different toolkit.
Yeah.
And that's maybe that's part of my I'm going into a different format, but that keeping it interesting and trying something new is exciting. And And they pay pretty well too.
Well, I know it's super secret, so I'm not going to ask any questions about it, but I will look forward to the opportunity to have you back, maybe when things are a little bit more pronounced, and then maybe when we're getting ready for premieres and things that.
One of these days, I'll have so much fun actually talking about these projects. Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time. Again, for our listeners out there, check out the books. I mean, what if you want to just get immersed in so many different worlds and different genres? It's just awesome. So it's been a pleasure to learn about your experience. So thank you so much for being here.
And thank you for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's it for us, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to the A.P.E.X. Hour here on KSUU Thunder 91.1. Come find us again next Thursday at 3 p.m. for more conversations with the visiting guests at Southern Utah University and new music to discover for your next playlist. And in the meantime, we would love to see you at our events on campus. To find out more, check out suu.edu/APEX. Until next week, this is Lynn Vartan saying goodbye from the A.P.E.X. Hour here on Thunder 91.1.